Oh, well, I live on a cooperative, and then I'm board of directors of a cooperative health food store and also a cooperative restaurant. And we have a small cooperative, an Andamarga cooperative, in the garage, a little food cooperative that we started as well. The Mulaney kindergarten, not the River School kindergarten, but the Mulaney kindergarten was also, when my kids were doing playgroup, there was also a co-op. Mulaney, when I first moved here, maybe 25, 30 years ago, was a town that was struggling a lot financially, and nowadays it's a much more prosperous place, and a lot of people do put that to a large degree to the cooperatives that have kept money in the town, and the cooperative bank or the credit union that's kept money in the town, made it possible for small businesses to grow here. And so it's quite possible that the prosperity of this town and the well-being and the culture that attracts a lot of people is because of the cooperative culture that's here. And it is kind of beautiful that people come here and they get swept into that cooperative culture and develop those skills themselves. It's easy, someone comes to town and they say, well, maybe I'll try being a director of this, or maybe I'll join this as a member. And they just become naturally part of the cooperative feeling and movement. And it's nice to see that. It's nice to see people transform through that process of cooperation. You do see that happen here. To live cooperatively requires developing skills that we don't necessarily have straight off. And so what I learned from living on this land is that joining a cooperative, in the sense that it's one where you live and where your house is the place where you've invested all your life savings. So you're pretty rooted in that place, and maybe you really like it as we do. Then it becomes very much like being part of a family. And when you make the commitment to the co-op, similar to making a commitment in a marriage, in a way everything comes out. You're all right there with each other. So we've had to learn good skills of cooperation, and it's a lot of relationship skills, actually. I've certainly heard people say that it's these relationship skills that we have to develop. We have to learn the whole cooperative mode of being in order to live cooperatively, work cooperatively.
So cooperative is more than just straight business then?
Well, perhaps one of the things I have learned is that there is a lot of straight business in running a cooperative. That's maybe a really valuable lesson, is that business skills are absolutely essential for a good cooperative. You need the same sensible, sound business skills and abilities as you do to run any business, maybe more, on top of which you need the human skills. But if it would be a mistake to think that you would run your cooperative without sound business skills. And one thing I learned was we had, on our board of directors in the last 3 years, we had a man come who had been a very successful businessman in South Africa, done very well for himself, came to Mulaney to try a different kind of lifestyle and decided to give his time for our cooperative. And at first people were a little bit hesitant because this guy was obviously well-to-do and had some of the classic kind of business skills, and he had to do a little bit of learning how to work in consensus, how to work with a group. But the skills he brought were invaluable for bringing our cooperative forward. And so I learned to value those skills, those business skills. One thing which I certainly think is important is that the board of directors has to be, as its standard, have a base of morality and ethics. It's important to have good business skills, it's important to have good interpersonal skills, but probably the absolute bottom line is there has to be the basic acceptance of morality and ethical dealings. And that ethical dealings would go on to the financial dealings of the company, dealings with the customers, dealings with the staff. And when everyone's on the same page that that's a bottom line for the board, I think that's like an absolute baseline for a cooperative. Skill level is really important, but the board of directors is that group which they control the executive or the manager, and the manager's doing everything else. They're also controlling the governance and the finance. And their moral standard is extremely important. I've been lucky to work in really good boards in that sense, that they can, you know, if that's not there, I think it's very hard to have a cooperative, so I think it's a really essential factor. Sometimes you have to make some big decisions, and if everyone's on the same page that our basis is ethical, our basis of business is ethics, our basis of treating our staff is ethics, our basis of treating our customers is ethics, is morality, then you can move forward. If there's any sense that somebody doesn't have that same moral standard, it creates problems. What I found, Mulaney is a place where there's a lot of cooperatives, and so almost everybody's been involved in a cooperative where we have a cooperative credit union, we had cooperative recycling business, there were cooperative publishing houses. A lot of people have been cooperative film society. Even the local gym is run, it's not called a cooperative, but it's run by its members. So people here seem to have developed a lot of good skills. Consensus decision making is one that it's really interesting. It seems to become a cultural habit. And I've become started to feel very strongly about the concept of consensus decision making as versus voting decision making. And when I moved to Mulaney, it's like many people simply know how to operate that way, simply only operate that way. And sometimes we'd have someone who'd come to our board of directors who was used to just a simple vote story, and they needed to learn the culture of consensus decision making. Many people, when they start, find it burdensome, awkward, but when people develop that skill, it's natural, just as it's natural in a family. You don't hold up your hands. How many people want this, that? Usually you all discuss together till you get something everyone's happy with. When you're working cooperatively, I certainly have found each individual's person's mental health is a huge part of what can work. I mean, a cooperative depends a lot on the ability to be able to work together, particularly on boards that are directing. And I'm not sure it's what you were saying in terms of consensus decision making, but it requires the ability to know what you're feeling, be able to express what you're feeling, separate your own emotions or whatever just happened before from the decision at hand. And I actually think emotionally functional people are a huge part of creating healthy cooperatives and cooperation. Yeah. I mean, you can kind of ruin a good board when someone isn't able to separate out their own issues or be very clear about what their emotional state is or what's the real reason that they want to be here, what's the real reason they feel like they need to take part or have a part in this decision. It's very nice when you work with clear people. It makes a huge difference. I think cooperation is really, really good for bringing people forward and bringing society forward. This whole idea of everyone has to move together. When you're doing consensus decision making, you're not going to leave one person behind. So you're not going to just say, well, because 4 of us like it and 2 of us don't, we leave the 2 of you behind. In consensus decision making, the feeling is we're going to bring everyone along together. And it comes out of the feeling that everyone's important and that we value everybody and that we want to be a team together. And it also brings that feeling of team building together. Sometimes it's fine to vote, and sometimes a healthy person says, fine, well, if I'm outvoted, no problem. And sometimes that's a sign of a healthy life too. But cooperation builds society for sure, and it both comes out of the kind of community where you want everyone involved, and it also builds that into your thinking.